Hi there, and welcome to Business Acceleration 2.0, brought to you by the Global Leaders Organization, or GLOW as we like to call it. I'm Michelle Lemons-Pacenti. I'm the CEO and founder of GLOW, and we're so happy that you're here with us today. We've got an exciting hour ahead of us. So, okay, without further ado, I'm excited to introduce you to our guest today. She is a newly, just noted today, a Wall Street Journal best-selling author of the book Undaunted. We've got it right here today. And for all of those that joined today, GLOW, we're going to be sending you a copy of Undaunted. She's also the founder and CEO of Hint, the beverage, the water beverage. So we're excited to have Kara here with us. Kara, thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the GLOW platform. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful. You know, you've had so much success in your career. You were an executive at some very well-known companies, and then you moved into becoming an entrepreneur. Give us a little bit of your background, how you went from executive to entrepreneur.
Yeah, so I started off my career actually in media, in the magazine industry, and then went on to work for a company called CNN. And from
A little company.
A tiny little company. Actually, it was fairly small at the time when I joined. And Ted Turner was still kind of running around the offices. And then I moved from New York to Silicon Valley, that's where I really got my first taste of entrepreneurism, and worked for a little startup that was doing online shopping, actually CD-ROM shopping first, and which eventually became CD-ROM or eventually became online shopping. And it was an idea that was actually started by Steve Jobs and spun out of Apple. And then AOL acquired our company, and they asked me to run this channel called Online Shopping. And so I ran all the partnerships. So I got to deal every day with the J. Crews and the Gap and all these like amazing, fun companies. When I left AOL, I was still living in San Francisco, but was traveling a lot to the East Coast, and somewhere in between, I had 3 kids and all under the age of 4. And I thought, this is $1 billion in revenue. It's time to go spend some time with my family and try and figure out what I want to do, maybe a little more locally in the Bay Area. And that's when I decided to really pay attention to my health. I had gained a bunch of weight over the course of having kids, and my energy levels were down. And I also just had developed terrible adult acne, which I didn't even have as a teenager. And so while I was, really paying attention to what I was putting in my body, including, the food and exercising, I really realized one day when I was staring at my can of diet soda, Diet Coke in particular, how many ingredients were in this diet soda. And everybody, including me, was so focused on food as being the thing that ultimately was, maybe something that you should, count the calories or look at the ingredients. But nobody had sort of woken me up to the drinks that I was putting in my body. And that's when I decided to do this little test and really just put the diet soda to the side and start drinking plain water. And what I realized is that I knew that water was better for me, but it was so boring. So I started slicing up fruit and throwing it in the water, not even thinking that it was, a potential company, but really something that helped me to get healthy. And in 2.5 weeks, I lost 24 pounds,
Wow.
which was crazy, right? Like, it just made no sense to me at all. My skin cleared up, my energy levels. And that was really kind of the first step for me to kind of wake up and realize that it's really hard for most people to get healthy. And even if you shop at, the best places and, you're exercising and doing everything that you're supposed to do, I mean, the number of people all over the world who are on diets or sort of, addicted to diet soda as I was, or, on this train of trying to figure out calorie counts. And at the end of the day, if you're actually just putting really good stuff into your system and working out, you may not actually have to, go that route of trying to, have a diet plan or ultimately be frustrated that you can't get as healthy as you wanted. So that was really kind of the the core idea behind Hint, when I saw that this product was really helping me to get healthy. And I was shopping at my brand new supermarket that opened up in San Francisco called Whole Foods, and I thought, this is like the perfect product that I would find in a store like this. And nothing was in the supermarket, and everything, there were kind of versions of carbonated water with fruit in it, but then a whole other topic when I started to learn some of the secrets behind some of the fruit that was in the drinks too. I just thought, I don't want any of those things in my drinks. I want real fruit, and I want water, and I want still water so that I can drink lots of water. And but I had no idea, first of all, didn't plan on being an entrepreneur. I had been working for entrepreneurs, but I, call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I really didn't think that this was ultimately what I was going to go do. Again, I had been in media, I had been in tech, I had never been in, the beverage industry or consumer products. But what I really realized was that my focus was really on helping me to get healthy, my family. And I thought just by starting this company that I could actually help a lot of other people too.
I like that, the accidental entrepreneur. So you wrote the book Undaunted, which is a great book. It has so many lessons in here. And I think it's wonderful for not only women, but for anyone that's out there starting a business, that's out there trying to move it and push it ahead. There were so many great lessons in it. I loved it. I loved reading your personal stories throughout it too. What motivated you to write the book?
So the book really stemmed out of a heavy travel schedule for the last 4 years, and spending a lot of time on the plane and in hotel rooms where I, didn't want to watch the news anymore. And so I started journaling, and that was really where I started writing down so many of these stories. I would be out public speaking about building this company that I had built, and kind of some of my experiences, and very similar questions would come up no matter where I was throughout the world, literally, on, how did you do this? How'd you think about it? Didn't you have doubts? Didn't you have fears? Like, you probably never failed. And so finally I started, initially just kind of answering those questions and sharing the fact that, I did have fears. I did have doubts. I had plenty of failures, and here's some of the stories around it. And I started hearing back from so many people that really helped them to kind of move forward just by hearing my stories. And so about a year ago, I finally, it was about 600 pages worth of a journal. I thought, gosh, I wonder if I could actually publish this in some way and get it out there. And so I did. I went to a publisher and got it out there. But I call myself an accidental author too, because people have asked, did you always want to be an author? And I'm like, I'm not going to lie. It feels pretty great now that it's done and it's out there and get the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. All of this, amazing stuff. But I, really did not write a book in sort of a typical way, I guess, that most authors kind of tackle it. So, but it hopefully it will be the book that people read to let them know that you're not alone, and you don't have to have it all figured out. What you need to do is actually not fear it and really tackle things and take little steps along the way. And hopefully this book will really help people to go and do that.
Well, I think it will. Now, your subtitle is Overcoming Doubts and Doubters, and it's a theme actually throughout the book. I know you've overcome a lot of doubt and doubters. What's one of your proudest moments of that?
So many. But I would say that the first one, just in building this company, was, it sounds great to think, okay, I'm going to go get a product on the shelf at Whole Foods. But, then I started really wondering, can I actually get the product on the shelf at Whole Foods? I don't know. I mean, maybe he'll say no. And then, of course, every time, there were little steps along the way as well, where I would get it on the shelf, and then the gentleman at Whole Foods would say to me, you have to have a longer shelf life. Now you need a distributor. I mean, there were so many things that I didn't know. But what I found, just by every time I encountered these doubts, most people feel like they have to know the answers, and they have to kind of, basically say, oh yeah, I know who the distributors were. I mean, for me, like, a distributor was somebody I saw driving down the street in a Coke truck or a Cisco, but I had no idea how to actually get a hold of these people, or any of kind of the process of actually getting it done. But what I figured out is that if you actually share with people that you don't have all the answers, you're definitely going to run into people who are going to, size you up for sort of not actually knowing the answers, and maybe think like, oh, she has no idea what she's talking about because she's never worked in this industry. But once in a while, you run into people who actually, recognize you're being authentic, and you're saying, I actually don't know the answers to that question. Maybe you can introduce me to somebody, or do you know someone who I could talk to? And again, I think it's just about communication and connecting, and finding people that will say yes, because you might need to knock on a lot of doors, but if you really ultimately want to get it done, you just have to kind of keep going and figure out, like, where can I go in order to accomplish what I need to do.
I love your lack of fear to ask questions, from your early days in your career to even, now, about when you're first starting the business on trying to learn about distributors. You have no fear to ask questions. Most people are scared to do that. Where did that come from for you?
Well, I think a lot of it is like, once you kind of get the hang of it, you just know that it's just not, again, you'll run into people who won't actually, tell you the answers, or maybe just tell you to go away or whatever. But I think after a while, you just feel like that's part of the journey. And I think it's so important to kind of look back and train your mind to recognize that you've been here before, and you've tackled really hard things. And I think some of those hard things might be from your personal life, they might be from your business life, but that all, when you start to think about those things, and maybe it's, creating a journal, maybe it's just kind of getting it in your mind, like, what are the top 10 things that you've really accomplished that have been really hard, that you didn't know that you were going to be able to do, but you did it. Those things, you automatically kind of go back to, if you sort of train your mindset to be able to say, like, I got this, I can do this. I didn't think that I was going to be able to get a product on the shelf. I didn't think I was going to be able to, be a girl from Arizona and move to, New York City, not knowing a soul, and end up, doing what I ultimately did. I think you just have to, get the confidence inside first. And the only way to do that is actually just to kind of really challenge yourself along the way to do those things. And one of the chapters in the book that I talk about is, it's something I do every single year. And I always have fears. I have a huge fear of heights that I've had my whole life, and I don't want to live with fear. And every year when I go and tackle my fear of heights, I get better and better. It's not done yet, and it's definitely something that I need to continue tackling, but I don't want to be living with fear. No one wants to be living with fear. And the only way that I believe you can actually get through that is to really challenge that fear and just keep going. And so I think, like, that's the most important thing.
So most people think entrepreneurs are fearless, they're risk takers, and in Undaunted, in the book, you talk a lot about the doubts. Is that what you would do to overcome your fear? You would just hit the challenge head on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you take steps along the way, baby steps along the way, and frankly, it's not just me. I mean, I've met so many entrepreneurs and professional athletes and just people that, seem like they've got it all together. They're super successful. But what I figured out is that they had so many doubts along the way. They had so many challenges. They had so many fears. And what they did was they just took steps, and they took baby steps along the way. And then those baby steps really started to add up to be able to, really celebrate more than anything else. I mean, I didn't know early on that we were going to be able to do what we've done in the beverage space. I mean, it's probably the most crowded category out there in business. I mean, there's over 2,000 beverages in the beverage space, and primarily run by, Coke, Pepsi, and Dr. Pepper Snapple. And today we're the largest independent non-alcoholic beverage in the country that doesn't have a relationship with any of those three. And we've been able to do it just by taking baby steps along the way and acting differently. And I also talk a lot about in the book how not actually having the experience and not knowing how to do things actually helps. And I've talked to many entrepreneurs about this as well, where there's no roadmap. You just keep going and trying. And I think that's scary, right? That's really scary. You continue to, tell yourself along the way, like, oh, I've got to go hire somebody from Coca-Cola because they're going to know a lot more than me. But the reality is that if you just actually go and try along the way, I really, really think that you'll recognize that you can ultimately accomplish a lot more than maybe you set out initially to think.
So taking baby steps. I also like your analogy where you talk about build the plane as you're flying, because I think so many entrepreneurs want to wait till things are just perfect before they step out. And talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I've always felt like you have to have a goal that you're going towards. But if you focus too much on that goal, often you just won't go, right? Like you won't get there. You'll just create all of these obstacles or walls right in front of you. And so what I've grown to realize is that instead you can always have a goal, but instead just kind of figure out little baby steps along the way that you can go and accomplish, because then you really start to recognize that you're getting a lot more done. I mean, somebody was talking to me about this the other day, like, do you have lists of things that you do? And I'm like, sometimes I do, but I think in my mind, I'm always thinking about, this bigger goal. And if I do have a list, it's just like a couple of things, because I actually want to feel good about myself, about what I'm accomplishing every single day. And I find, like, if you're overwhelmed and you've got, 10 things that you want to accomplish and you only do 2, right? Like, then you think, oh gosh, I didn't get anything done today, right? Like, instead, celebrate the wins and celebrate the things that you're ultimately going to do. And I think that just, goes to the building the plane as you're flying it analogy, because it's not about, having it all together. It's really about, doing a little bit at a time, and then really being able to look back in the rearview mirror and say, gosh, I've really actually accomplished quite a bit.
Yeah. We talk a lot about values on this platform, because the importance of really understanding what your company's values, what your values are, and really aligning them to your decision making. That was a big factor for you when you were working with Starbucks, right?
Yeah. I think Starbucks in particular was kind of there were a few different stories in the Starbucks story that hopefully people will get a lot out of. I mean, I think that the thing for me that I learned in really partnering with Starbucks was they're an amazing brand. Obviously, it was very exciting when we got into all 11,000 locations. But I really kind of hung my hat on the fact that, there's this great relationship that we're working with, and over 40% of my business was in the hands of this large corporation. And while we were doing great with Starbucks, one day they decided that their business needed to really change and put food into the cold case that they have in their stores, and which meant that they had to eliminate certain products, including mine. So that was a time when I really, kind of kicked myself, because when we ended up getting kicked out of there and removed from the case, I thought, oh my gosh, like, this could have sunk me with 40% of my business. really tied up and really at the mercy of them making these kind of decisions. But really what I realized with that relationship was that whenever something kind of challenging or bad happens, you have a choice. Like you can sit there and have a pity party for yourself and say, gosh, this is really bad. What am I going to do? And you're allowed to do that, I think, for a few minutes. But and then I think figure out exactly what would you have done differently. What I would have done differently is not actually have 40% of my business in the hands of somebody that's ultimately going to be able to change my life, right? And that was a lot for us. And then the other thing that happened from that Starbucks relationship was that we ended up getting a phone call from an Amazon buyer, and they were starting this grocery business, and they wanted to partner with us because they had seen our product at Starbucks. And so, with the bad, I always feel like, in your journey ends up coming these other opportunities. And then ultimately, I think if we wouldn't have been in Starbucks, then we probably wouldn't have gotten that phone call from Amazon to do what we ultimately did. And we were very successful in Amazon, still today super successful in Amazon, but because we don't get the data from Amazon, we decided to start our own direct-to-consumer business, which today is 55% of our overall business.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I know. Amazing, yeah. Right? And I keep going back to this like hard and challenging time with Amazon. And again, while that was, an amazing business to have for a year and a half, what I realized is that, again, you could sit there and be angry at Howard Schultz or Starbucks or whatever, but I'm like, a lot of really great stuff came out of that might not have come out of it, or might not have happened if that partnership wouldn't have been what it was. And so I really think that, from a value standpoint, it's really, recognizing that you do, what you can and see what you can at the time, but also don't beat yourself up more than anything about, what ultimately happens. You just keep continuing to figure out what's good out of that partnership or that previous partnership.
And I apologize. Your hint is in so many different large, well-known brands. It was actually Whole Foods where it really tested your values, right? Whole Foods, yes. Starbucks.
Yeah, we've had so many. I mean, the situation with Whole Foods, I mean, they're a great partner of ours. They're still a great partner, but we had a buyer back in 2009, another crazy time in the world, and the buyer shared with us that we were going to be kicked out of Whole Foods if we didn't ultimately give them the product. And again, I didn't really realize how that would allow us to stay in business, because giving product away for free is not such a great business model. And so we said no, we weren't going to do that. And so that's a chapter in my book where you really have to, don't be afraid to really think about, is this the right thing for my business? And, that may force you to like grow slower. But, running out of capital and cash and not being able to, survive. I saw so many companies that did, crazy deals, whether it was with Whole Foods or other companies in 2009, because they were afraid. And I think that is, really, that goes back to, just figuring out what is best for you and like understanding maybe what's best for them, but, don't be afraid to really kind of put stakes in the ground around what is going to be best for you and your company.
Mm-hmm. Values. It's interesting. I've spoke to so many different entrepreneurs in Glow that are really, they're trying to determine what their values are. They aren't clear. How did you determine what your values were? Was that just through a process that came over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also just kind of, I read a ton, I read about companies and founders, and I think that where I've seen things actually go wrong is when, you don't really understand like what's important for you and for your business. I mean, would that make you feel great to, like stay with a relationship because you were giving away something? I mean, it's just, again, it's like it's operating out of fear. It's not operating out of like knowing what is right and what is like ultimately good for you. And so I think that it just really goes to the point of recognizing and being confident and not, doing stupid stuff that ultimately is going to, tank your business.
Right.
And also not make you feel like you're leading during a time when it's, pretty scary out there. So I have looked back in history at so many times for Hint or for, other companies where, when you do operate in fear, it just doesn't work out. And
Right.
don't be afraid ultimately to put, part of your values are that you're going to go slower, and that's okay too, because, you can sit there and look at so much that's happened in history where people say like go fast, and it doesn't work out so well when you do go fast. And it sounds great, but that's not necessarily what you should ultimately, tie your business to.
I like how in the book you talk about branding and bringing your own personal story to the table in regards to branding. Share with the audience a little bit about that, because I think that's great.
It's funny, when I started this company 15 years ago, I remember going out in Silicon Valley to many of the VCs that were drinking Hint, and who I had known from, the tech industry that I had been dealing with. And they knew the story. If you had written or had read articles that heard about Hint, and I think about it now and laugh, because so many of them shared with me, don't actually tell your story because it makes you seem small, like a mom and pop, kind of operation. And I kept being like, well, it is my story. Like, that's why I started this company, because so many people were asking me, oh, you've moved from tech to, beverages. Like, why would you do that? And I said, well, it was actually like, I recognized that health was something that I really wanted to solve. And I saw it as a huge opportunity. And so, over time, frankly, I just felt like it was just a lot easier for people to really understand why I was doing what I was doing, as I told my story. And so it's interesting, because nobody was talking about mission-driven companies when I started Hint. And I mean, that's exactly what this was. There was a reason and there was a why. And I felt like by just telling my story along the way, I would also enable people to tell my story too. One of my favorite stories that I remember too is when I was in Georgia. I was at a hotel. We were on spring break and with my kids, and somebody saw that I was drinking. I had a few bottles of Hint out by the pool with me, and somebody came by and said, "By the way, I'm sorry to interrupt you talking to your daughter, but where'd you get that Hint at?" And she had seen a segment on I think it was CNBC, and said, the woman who's the founder of that company, I saw her on the segment and I heard her whole story. Of course, she had no idea who she was, talking to. And she said, and I said, "Oh, really? Tell me the story." And she knew the entire story. And she said, "I just think it's like amazing. I mean, I've like had a Diet Coke addiction," and she went on and on. And so again, I think it's something, it's very memorable. It's very connecting for people. And so I think the more you can get your why out, and everybody has a why for starting companies, right? Like, why not tell people about it? And it's a huge way to differentiate yourself, especially in a crowded industry.
I love that. And I love how authentic you are. Even though everyone said don't do that, you just said no. It's truth. It's your transparency. And it has worked for you, which is wonderful. People want authenticity. Okay, so in your book, you talk about the importance of being in networks and networking. Glow is all about community and really getting together and networking. Can you speak just a bit about the positive elements that have come from you being involved in different organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I think for what I've really figured out is that it's look, it's lonely when you're trying to figure out a business. People say it's lonely at the top. I mean, I think it's especially if you're the underdog in an industry and you're really trying to do something pretty big. It's really tough. Like I found that a lot of people in the beverage industry wouldn't chat with me because I didn't have the experience that they thought that I should have. And so I found that actually going into these networks, I would find people not necessarily in the beverage industry, but maybe, dealing with like, how did you raise money? How did you build your board? It's always these questions that you have, and it's sort of industry agnostic more than anything else. And you would find people too that would be willing to share maybe a lot more than, other people in your industry as well. And so you and I talked about this earlier, but I've been a part of YPO for years and also C200. And then I've also got advisors in my company that I've built up my own network of people that are just amazing, that are sort of, have done things that I think are really admirable. I mean, Leslie Blodgett from Bare Essentials and Elaine Rubin, who had built the 1-800-Flowers online commerce brand. So I feel like you can also tap into people to build your own network as well. You don't need to necessarily join a network. And sometimes, like, I find too that building out these networks, like I look at C200 versus YPO versus, some of these other networks that I'm a part of, they all are a little bit different. And that was the other thing that I felt like, I've never had just kind of one group of people that has really interested me. I mean, it's been, I'm sort of like Switzerland. I end up, finding these little groups. Like some of them are very business oriented. Some of them are, much more like, travel or you just have to find these groups. I don't believe you even have to be a part of just one group. You can find different groups.
Yeah,
for different things.
I totally believe in networking and being a part of the community. Okay, we're going to go now to questions from our audience. So we're going to bring on a live question. This first question is from Sam Brofman. If you can, we'll bring her on the screen and she can ask her question to you. Sam?
Hi, yeah, I'm here. Hi, my question is, you've really been able to keep your company consistent with your values. How have you been able to keep from selling out?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's really been staying close to the customer. And from day one, we've had a way for the customer to really share with us how this product is helping. We had a 1-800 number and email on our bottle. So I think it's a little easier when you have a physical product than maybe a service, just as a sort of side point. But when you start hearing from the customer that you have a product that's helping, right? That I think really helps you to stay centered on what your purpose is and what you're ultimately trying to do. Because you'll hear a lot of noise. I remember when we launched a product outside of beverages, our sunscreen, I did it really to help myself first with getting a sunscreen that I would ultimately wear that didn't have oxybenzone and some of the other ingredients in it. And I remember so many people in the beverage industry writing to me saying, why are you launching a sunscreen? You guys are a beverage company. You're not supposed to be doing that. And I thought, I'm not actually doing it for the beverage industry. I'm doing it for our customers. And our customers were saying, thank you so much for giving me a product that actually helps me get healthy. When are you coming out with your next product? And I thought, I just finished this last week. So, give me a moment, to sort of get my arms around it. But again, I think like if you just focus on the customer and try and think about how you can ultimately service them, whether that be with a product or, in the case of distribution, it's very competitive out there, obviously, for our industry. And when we started going direct to customers with our site on drinkhint.com or through Amazon, what I realized is that customers were really excited because we were servicing them as well. Like they were frustrated that we weren't in their local stores. And so I feel like staying close to the customer is really what helps you to really stay centered too, and stick with your values.
Yeah. It's important. Okay, we've got another question that's coming in from Facebook. This is from Lee Logan, and he asked the question, or she, I'm not quite sure. Do you feel like your sales process with products translates to those of us who have service businesses? Event production is my arena. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it really just goes back to where is this customer? I have plenty of friends in the events business, and I think rather than waiting for events to kind of become back to where it was, I mean, actually trying to figure out where is this customer. And I mean, obviously, plenty of people have found live audiences like what we're doing right now, or Zoom.
Right.
And so trying to figure out how do you ultimately pivot. And I think that, during challenging times, I would say that that's where the synergies really kind of play out for whether you're a service business or a product business. You just have to kind of figure out what's working and where your customer is. And that's really what's the most important thing. And there's some things that are out of your control. And I mean, I've learned that, again, going back to 2009, and you have to really think about like, what are the areas that are ultimately going to really be in your control where you can do something about it.
Our next question kind of tees up with that, with your answer just now. This is from Ed Robinson. He's on YouTube. And the question is, how has the pandemic disrupted, impacted your business, specifically managing remotely?
Well, we had a huge remote staff prior to the pandemic. So we have, street salespeople and sampling people throughout the U.S. that were already remote. But what we were really challenged with was we had basically 3 revenue streams coming into the company. The, sales that occur in the Targets and Kroger's and all the rest of the retail outfits of the world. And then we had this direct to consumer business, as I mentioned. And then we also had a pretty big chunk of business into tech offices. We started in Google and Facebook, and then we were sort of spread out in offices across the US. We made a pretty quick decision in March, way ahead of so many other companies, that that offices would close throughout the US throughout the US for the remainder of the year. And so with that, we were going to lose a lot of sales because, of course, if there's no people in the office, why would they be ordering beverages for their employees? And so, again, this goes back to what was ultimately working for our company, the direct-to-consumer business. And so we threw the gas on that direct-to-consumer business. And what we found also was that, this kind of goes back to something else I was talking about the story and what our values are. We have always done everything as locally as possible, including producing our product as locally to our distribution points. And so through the storytelling, we've shared that we don't actually bring in any of our products or components of our product from outside of the US. We do everything here in the US and in 8 different plants as locally as possible. And so as we were dealing with this pandemic and, really trying to figure out exactly what would happen with, the revenue previously coming from this office distribution, and we were doing what we could to really throw the gas onto our direct-to-consumer business. We got a phone call from Costco, and they said, "Do you do everything locally? We've heard you tell this story before, and we're really having challenges with getting product and from some of our suppliers. So we want to flip the switch and have you go national with us," in the middle of the pandemic.
Wow.
And so, yeah, which was amazing. But again, that just kind of goes back to, don't be afraid to share your values and why you're doing things, and really share your story. But it also, really shows that, like, if you really sit there and do focus on what you can control, that's really the most important thing. And then, this other business, good things will happen. Right.
Okay.
So.
That's great. That's an awesome answer to that. I love this. I didn't know that about Costco. You didn't put that in the book.
Well,
right?
We didn't know it. I mean, it was, the book was actually, my manuscript was turned in at the end of January.
Okay. So the pandemic hadn't even happened yet, not started really.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, we've got another question that's coming in. This was coming from Mike Weiner, and he's going to come on screen. So Mike, welcome.
Yes. Hi, Kara. Thank you. I'm really enjoying this. I was just curious where the name Hint came from.
Well, so when I was thinking of the product, I, had been at home with my young kids, 3 under 4 at the time, and was trying to get them off of drinking juice. And so I used to say to them, so just drink water. And initially they couldn't say the word water, so they were saying Wawa. And I said, close enough, right? So as I was thinking of this product, I said, maybe we should just call it Wawa. And when I shared it with my husband, including the fact that I was gonna have this idea for launching a business, but I was also pregnant with our 4th child, and there's a chapter in the book that I share all of this information with them. I shared that I had this idea, and it would be really great if if we called it Wawa. And he said, "You've been hanging out, I think, a little too long at home with the kids and coming up with these ideas. And by the way, there's this huge chain in Pennsylvania that is called Wawa, and I don't think that's a great idea." He's an intellectual property lawyer, and so he was concerned from the legal, like the rights of the word and whether or not I could register it. And so in the midst of this, I said, well, maybe, he said, why don't you just talk to me a little bit more about some other ideas that you had for names? And I hadn't even thought of anything at this point. And as I was describing what I really wanted to call it, I said, we're giving people hints. There's just a little hint of flavor. And then I said hint, and he said, forget it. It's a 4-letter word. You'll never get it registered. And then, I said to him, while you're at it, why don't you also try and register drink water, not sugar? And he started laughing. He said, you're ridiculous. I mean, there's just no way that you're going to get this registered. So I said, you be the lawyer at this point, and I'm the business person, and just see what you could do. And I even left that conversation thinking, I'm not even sure that this is ultimately going to happen, but we did. We got both, actually, worldwide trademarks on Hint and drink water, not sugar. So I don't know if that's a story of don't listen to your lawyer or don't listen to your husband or your spouse. I'm not sure, but it happened, and I'm super happy that it did.
Yeah. Well, we love Hint, the water, and we love the book Undaunted. So we want to remind everyone, joining Glow, if you join Glow today, the full or premium level, will be sending you a copy of Undaunted, Kara's book. It's a great read. I loved it. Tons of lessons in there. We're going to spend this time now and let Kara go on over into the VIP room, and Kent is going to be facilitating that with Kara. Kara, thank you so much. Stay safe and goodbye.